Is it a sin to get a tattoo? What does the Bible actually say? Let's give some attention to just two passages. One from the Old Testament and one from the New Testament. And from these two passages, we will see what the Bible actually says about that skull and crossbones you have on your shoulder, or that Tweety bird you have on your ankle. The verse that usually comes to mind to answer this question is Leviticus 19:28. Here's what the verse says. Leviticus 19:28. You shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor tattoo any marks on you. I am the Lord. That sounds pretty clear, doesn't it? But wait a minute. Before we jump to any conclusions, let's dig into this verse and see what it is actually saying. This is a verse that was written to the Israelites living in a land surrounded by the Canaanite nations. Now, these were pagan nations that were extremely idolatrous. Their tattoos were part of a ritualistic practice to honor the dead and to worship their false gods. And so Leviticus 19 is part of a series of laws designed to set them apart and make them distinct from these idolatrous nations around them. In fact, if you back up the very beginning of the chapter, Leviticus 19:1 and 2 says, And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. So they were not to be like the Canaanite nations. That's why you will find laws in the surrounding verses commanding them not to shave their beards, which you read in verse 27, and not to wear clothing made from different fabric blended together, which you find in verse 19. If we are going to say that it's a sin to get a tattoo, then we also have to say that it's a sin to shave our beards or wear clothing that might be a blend of fabrics. Now, granted, there are other moral laws that are included, such as not prostituting your daughters, mentioned in verse 29, and not sleeping with someone who is engaged to be married to someone else, which absolutely apply to us today. But contextually, all of these commandments were written to keep ancient Israel from imitating the behaviors and practices of the idolatrous pagan nations. That contextual setting is important to keep in mind. The Bible has instructions that are given to specific people at a specific time. They don't always apply to everyone for all time. If that was true, then where is your ark? I can go to Genesis 6 and read a command to build an ark. So where is your ark? Of course, we understand that this was a specific command given to Noah at a specific point in history and for a specific reason to save them from the coming global flood. So when you think about this passage in Leviticus 19 that prohibits tattoos, you are reading something that was never meant to be applied to us today. It was written specifically to ancient Israel for the specific purpose of keeping them separate from the surrounding pagan nations. In fact, it isn't just Leviticus 19. Christians today are not bound by the Old Testament law at all. Passages like Romans 15:4, 1 Corinthians 10:6-11 tell us that we can learn from the Old Testament, but it is not a law God intended for us to obey today. Today we live under the New Testament. If you read Hebrews 8, you will find a contrast between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And in Hebrews 8:13, it says that he has made the first obsolete. Now what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. So while this verse in Leviticus gives us insight into God's heart, our behaviors are not governed by old covenant laws. Now let's think about a second passage, this time from the New Testament. Remember that we are not under the Old Testament law, but we are under the New Testament law. Is there anything in the New Testament that tells us that getting a tattoo is a sin? Now, to show that tattoos are a sin, some people will quote 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 19 and 20. Let's take a look at what it says. Or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own? For you were bought at a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. Once again, you have to place the verse into the context and see what it's actually saying. If you look at the surrounding verses, you will find that the subject being addressed is sexual immorality, not tattoos. Back up to verse 13. Foods for the stomach and the stomach for foods, but God will destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. In context, there were some who were saying that just as food was made to satisfy our hunger, so it is that our bodies were made to satisfy our sexual urges. And the Holy Spirit responds to that thinking by saying that the body is not for sexual immorality. The body is made to glorify God. You keep reading and you come to verse 18, the verse just prior to what we read earlier in verses 19 and 20. Flee sexual immorality. Every sin that a man does is outside the body, but he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body. And those thoughts lead to verses 19 and 20, which tell us, or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit? And this is a passage that has nothing to do with tattoos and piercings. It is about not using your body to engage in sexual immorality. Now, some may argue and say, I get that this is about sexual immorality, but isn't it true in principle that tattoos are a sin because we are marking the body, which is the temple of the Holy Spirit? If that were true, then we would have to say the same thing about anything we do with our bodies. Are we prepared to say that it is a sin not to exercise? Or it is a sin to smoke? Or to eat processed foods since we are damaging the temple of the Holy Spirit? Here's something fascinating. Listen to what God himself said in Isaiah 49, verse 16. Isaiah 49, verse 16. See, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. In this passage, God actually said that he inscribed, that is, he tattooed his people on the palm of his hands. Now, obviously, this is not a literal tattoo, but a metaphor that God uses to show his love and permanent commitment to his people. If God was against tattoos, then why would he himself use it to characterize how he feels about his people? So is getting a tattoo a sin? Not necessarily. But here's some things you might want to think about before getting one. What kind of message does this tattoo send? Does the tattoo contain any kind of vulgarity? Is it going to be something that I can live with long term? How will it affect my ability to present myself as a Christian? The Bible does not tell us that tattoos are a sin. If you want to get that tattoo of your children's names, if you want to show your love for your favorite sports team, or if you want to have some artistic expression by getting an artistic design, there's nothing biblically wrong with doing so. So what do you think? Are tattoos sinful or just personal? Drop your thoughts in the comments.